Good afternoon. We'd like to thank you for being a part of our workshop today and know that you will learn a lot in the next little while from an extraordinary company. And at this time, I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Pyre, Superintendent.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And this study has been prepared and was ready way back. Was it maybe February when I first met with you as the beginning pieces of how it was looking and talking about how we were going to present it to the board and all those kinds of things. Just as we got into it, we went ahead and scheduled the events for, I think, the last of March, definitely the month of April. We will be talking about this. This was last year's stuff. But the pandemic got in the way, and we put this on hold. However, we did do a brief discussion on the growth portion of it as we were doing the attendance areas to give y'all some clarity about why I wasn't moving hundreds of more children based on, surprisingly, the results of this report. So we looked at that, and I'll be addressing that later in the goals. Then, however, we also, but the most striking part was the amount of things that need to be done in the schools on the needs assessments. They went around to each of the schools, looked at our present places. Overall, they'll tell you that we've done remarkably well with the limited funds that we have. But all of our funds have gone to provide new seats, to purchase trailers, to build wings, to build schools. No money has been really put back in the school except our general fund money that we put aside for facilities, which is basic things, not new roofs, not new air conditioning systems. Those cost millions of dollars. So we've tried to do, only when something completely fails, we go in and try to fix it. We need to be on a progressive plan to do those things, and that's why we asked for this study to be done, to give us some direction on just how deep it was. And I have not seen the final part because I just hadn't time to look at it, but they have it tonight, and I think it's probably going to be astronomical. The reason we did this is to show you we have to start thinking in the future. Where is this money going to come from? How are we going to take care of the buildings we have? We've done a good job, but just like your homes and your car, if you don't keep them up, you don't get much for them later because you can't keep, nobody wants them at that stage or that state. We have thousands of kids going through our schools, and we need to keep them up. And we do the best we can. All of them look good. We paint them every year and those types of things, but that's cosmetic. There's some big things that need to be addressed, and that big ticket items, and I think they'll share that with you tonight. So I'm anxious to see that and want you to look very close at that, because I would like the facilities committee, probably with the whole board, at some time we need to begin to prioritize what order these things should be in. Safety items that the safety committee has already mentioned, we pull those out. We also look at things like air conditioners and roofs and put them on a schedule maybe of how we can begin to do that. And then most importantly, how in the world are we going to find funding for this? How will we carve that out as we plan our future budgets? So with that said, Thompson Turner did the study, and a very good job. And at this time, Ben, if you want to begin.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you again. Ben Thompson with me today is Michelle Smith, also with our firm. Michelle and I both walked the schools together. She has a whole team here in Charleston that walk the schools as well. Jenny Kirk and Stephanie, and of course Hal are joining us too from Thompson Turner. Today is all about making that next step. We talked a lot about demographics last time. We talked a lot about trends and what that means from a growth perspective here for Summerville. But as we've walked those schools and as we have assessed them from a quality standpoint, we've also assessed them from what is today's dollars associated with that assessment of cost and value as well. So we're going to share all of that with you. This is actually a very deep dive into every single one of your schools. Every single one of your schools has a booklet that's about this big now with a whole lot of qualifying data in it. I'm going to add to that booklet tonight. It's going to be about this thick with the cost data that goes along with that. And the whole point of that, the whole reason that we're doing that is to give you guys every single option available to you as you talk about and as you think about the priorities over the next 10 years. So as we look at that list of priorities, you can quickly see what decisions need to be made and how those decisions affect time and how those decisions affect cost at the end of the day as well. So overall there we went through your 25 schools, included the stadium, so 26 facilities were reviewed overall over the last several months. And just a little bit more about what that is. I know you guys have a copy of the draft report where we talk about the executive summary for each of those schools, but the basis of that executive summary is about 500 other qualifying review items that Michelle and her team have looked at in each individual school. Each one of those items, whether it be mechanical, whether it be plumbing, whether it be toilets, whether it be flooring, what have you, all of those qualifiers are based on a ranking system. You can see those that go from 1, which is critical and need to be addressed between now and the next 2 years, all the way to brand new, excellent. No need to think about that in a capital improvements plan. No need to think about that in a maintenance budget. Those can be reassessed in 3 to 5 years later on to make sure that their quality remains the same. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to just ask real quick because we've got some emails that hearing impaired are reading with. Is there a way you can maybe turn, I know you're still on guard, not your back against him, Mr. Mitchell, but
Yep.
the camera, if they choose to be able to.
Sure. Is that better? Oh, there we go.
Your mic.
There we go. That's good.
Is
that better?
To hear that. She wanted to.
So,
Can you see okay?
I was going to ask, where is that document on,
yeah, Michelle
It
emailed
was,
it.
she emailed it, and so it's in an email
Yes, sir.
attachment.
Yep. Right. It's an executive summary, but it is a very long executive summary if you've noticed. It's about 200 pages of all the things that roll up to what each individual school is all about. In the executive summary, we kind of list out our process there, and that includes those ranking systems. And if we look at all of the categories, all of the items that we compiled, that generally gives us a ranking for each of those, for each individual school. And so in that executive summary, right up front, you can see what those scores for each school would be. So I know it's small on the screen here, but you certainly can take a look at that document and see where the deficiencies are. So that's the process, but also what we've created, and this is for the benefit for Dorchester School District 2 moving forward, is you now have a tremendous catalog, you now have a tremendous database in which to base not only your short-term maintenance plans on, but decisions when it comes to long-term capital improvements plans moving forward. So that's certainly, we're happy to have that and give that to the school district to use overall. Instead of going through all 26 facilities, which I'm happy to do, by the way, I thought we would just start with 6, and then we can talk a little bit more about all the other ones too. We focused on just 6 this afternoon to give you a good idea of what's inside those executive summaries and what those costs items tend to be. So I'm going to ask Jenny and Michelle to join me as we talk through some of these things and see how it overall interacts with the 10-year plan. So starting first at Somerville Elementary School, you remember we talked about the demographics of that facility. Last time around, it seems to be fairly stable from an enrollment standpoint, but it is one of the oldest schools here in the school district. Michelle?
Great. Again, it's so great to be back with you all. Thank you again so much for giving us the opportunity to help you with your schools. We feel like they're so important. So just to recap what we did and how we translated our evaluations and our assessments to the team at Thompson Turner in order for them to assign cost. You know, we walked every school. We made general observations in 5 major categories. So we reviewed site, building envelope and roof, the interiors of the school. We typically walked every corridor, every classroom sample, so a sample classroom of every grade, every assembly space, cafeteria, gymnasium, every example special education room, every music and specialty area room. We tried to cover every single one of those spaces in every facility. And then also mechanical, electrical, and plumbing information, which was complemented by the facilities department. So we shared our ranking, scoring, evaluation system with them, and they gave us feedback about the specific systems for each school because they are the closest to it and, you know, are satisfying all of the historical work orders that have been performed for those systems. And then finally, health, safety, and security. So, you know, some of these items overlapped, but we tried our best to categorize our evaluations and render some, you know, scores and ranks. And so I would have to say that going through the process of evaluating 26 facilities, you know, there is a little bit of subjective opinion that is rendered, as you might imagine. If you can imagine yourself going through and making a judgment call about the wall finish. I mean, you know, we do this at our house, you know, at our houses and our cars. This is a great analogy. Well, it's not as cool as I would like for it to be, but, you know, it could be a little cooler. So we have to, my team worked really hard to be as consistent as possible in our evaluations because, you know, we are different people making these opinions, and sometimes you cannot, you have to take the entire evaluation as a whole and then make sure you're back-checking your evaluation so that it is consistent and fit. So I just want to mention that to you because we're cognizant of that. You know, we made very careful decisions when we were ranking these and scoring these categories. Now, what we did was, and you have that scoring, we just showed you the scoring system. So 5 was the highest rank, 1 was the lowest rank, something urgent, something needing immediate attention. You know, I would say that by and large, a lot of our scores fell into the 3 category, fell into the 3, you know, right in the middle. You know, and it's a little bit of a subjective decision in order to say, well, should it be replaced in 6 years? You know, when you take one condition that's a 3 and you take, say, at Oak Brook Middle, and you take another condition at that's a 3 at Alston Middle, you know, then you start to frame which 3 is more important and which 3 may be able to wait a little longer. And I say that because this is quite broad brushed, but we do feel like we need some input from you and from the facilities department to help prioritize, you know, these tasks and what these improvements ultimately will need to be. So what we did was we took everything that was a 3, a 2, and a 1. And Thompson Turner, and Jenny will get into this, really got into the nitty-gritty of our background, our deficiency reports, and started to assign a price to what it would cost to improve that specific score. And, you know, there was some back and forth between us, you know, the architects that rendered the evaluation and her team in order to get, you know, really try to dial in as much as we could to what the problem was and what it would cost to bring that problem, to solve it, to bring it up to code, to make it better, to improve the school. So we knew as architects, you know, the ones were the most urgent ones. And, you know, there were a few of those. And I would say that the most important ones in my mind have to do with health, safety, and security. You know, so obviously the costs for those were moved into, you know, a certain pot. And maybe Jenny, maybe this is time for you to get into how we structured that.
Okay, thank you. All right, again, thanks for having us. I'm Jenny Kirk. I'm with Thompson Turner Construction. And I thought I would kind of fly back up a little bit higher and just talk about a little bit more about our process so you kind of understand how we came about ascertaining the numbers that we've assigned thus far to the work. In a perfect world, we'd love to say that the cost estimating portion of this type of work is science, and it's very black and white, but unfortunately, it really is not, and it's quite a mixture of science and artistry and a little bit of wizardry maybe even, because there is so much subjectivity to the data that we're interpreting. But let me just say that the information that we got from McMillan, Paz, and Smith was extremely detailed and thorough. So not only were we getting this rating system that you're seeing here, so we weren't just assigned a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for a school or even for each category. Each item that you're looking at, and I'm talking some 350 to 500 line items per school, all the way down to the condition of a floor tile or specific ceiling tiles in specific rooms, was addressed. And accompanying that, we also received photographic data, which paralleled with marked floor plans of actually where was that condition in that school. So you're going to have all of this that we're talking about tonight as a tool for you, the administration and the board, to use, particularly your facility staff, to be able to use when you're really trying to prioritize your maintenance plans for the future. So we took all of that information, coupled with all of the REI reports. REI is a consultant that you've used the school district for many years, evaluating the envelope of the building. We had those reports, as well as everything that you're seeing here. And we wanted to come up with this tool, and so what is this tool? It's a database that will work with your facility staff and your administration to really refine more. But from that, we also had to start prioritizing, okay, they can't do all of this work in year one. They can't probably even do all of this work over 6 years, but what makes the most logical sense in terms of sequencing? So for instance, if we know that there have been a lot of leaking conditions where ceiling tiles have been stained, we're not going to go in and start replacing ceiling tiles prior to going in and fixing the roof. It's a very simplistic example, but these are the kind of considerations that and when I say we, let me just back up a minute and say that this woman, Stephanie Morgan, did all the heavy lifting here. I'm just doing all the talking. So she did do all of this work, and she went through every single one of these facilities with a fine-tooth comb and all of the information that she received from NPS. So that being said, she's tried to first start by sequencing the work in terms of priority, sequencing the work in terms of priority by rating, and then also by getting feedback that was received from your maintenance facility and from McMillan, Paz, and Smith. There were a number of calls back and forth really trying to decide, okay, what do you need to do in the first couple of years versus what could wait for maybe year 5 or year 6. And so all of that information coupled together, that's when we started really assigning numbers to that data. Now, I will tell you that what you are seeing today are today's dollars. And we are going to come, after we have revisited this with your maintenance staff and helped align all of our priorities, we will advise you on how much escalation we believe that you need to carry for each year. But it may be that you not do any of this work, because it may be that some of this work ends up rolling into perhaps a replacement school or an addition, or because of the poor condition of whatever that facility may be. But where did we get our information? Where did we get our cost data? We have completed a lot of capital improvement works for a number of school districts across the state for the last 5 years. And so there's a lot of very similar project work and scope that we've done recently, and we used a lot of that data to apply it here to the numbers that you're going to see. And so I don't know if you want to move on to the next one, and we can show you how we kind of have rolled it up. This is a very high-level summary of what we're going to show you in your executive summary for each school. So you're going to see the name of the facility, and then you're going to see the 5 categories that we have divided into. So you've got your site, your building envelope, your interiors, your MEP, and your health, security, and safety, as Michelle just said. And then, as I was mentioning before, Stephanie started making her own assumptions about priorities and how you might look at that over year 1 versus all the way up to year 6. And then you've got your direct costs. We want to make sure that you're thinking not only about what you're going to pay a contractor such as Thompson Turner or any other general contractor to actually perform the work, but you also need to think about those indirect costs that are associated with it. What are you going to pay Ben and the engineers? What legal fees are going to be required? What permitting fees are going to be required? Third-party inspections, surveys, that type of thing. So all of that is included in that indirect cost budget. And then, of course, you see here the total cost budget for years 1 through 3, and then 4 through 6, and then again, your totals. Trying to think if there's anything else there. I'll just reiterate that these are basically based on today's dollars, and that we will advise on what we think you need to carry for escalation once you really determine, is this a maintenance project for year 1, or is this something that we're going to push down the road to maybe years 5 or 6? Right now, we're advising owners to carry anywhere from 3 to 5% a year for escalation, but in this market, as you know, things have been a little volatile and have changed a lot, and we expect to see some continued change over the next few years, particularly over the next year as we see a lot of really hungry subcontractors, which really helps for competition. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
I think the only thing that maybe that I would, excuse me, Jenny, that I would add there is you'll have a copy of all this. I'm going to give you a copy of all this too. I know it's really hard on the screen. It's always, when you're talking about a database, it's always really hard to have that as a presentation. It's much easier just to get it and study through it. So we'll certainly get you a copy of that so you can see it more directly as well. But like Jenny said, we looked at what that subtotal is for the first couple of ratings. We looked at what that subtotal was for the second couple of ratings. Not that you're going to spend maybe $9 million at this particular school. It's that all of those items and options that we listed out were $9 million in total. So now it's incumbent upon us to really sit down, do that internal workshop with facilities and maintenance, and assign what it actually needs to be overall at the end of the day. Michelle, anything you would add from that perspective? Okay. We did both Somerville Elementary as an example, but we also did Span as an example. In this one, they are in close proximity and obviously share a similar campus, but same principles apply, and we won't go through it in detail like Michelle and Jenny did just a moment ago, unless you have any questions about it. But we'll just keep going through each one of these. And now that you understand kind of maybe what the setup is for each one of them. So again, pretty stable enrollment at Span, decreasing slightly. Overall, it does have a number of portable classrooms associated with it in the area, so that was one thing that we talked about last time. We did have Michelle did go through and qualify each one of those 5 categories that she mentioned: the site, the building envelope, the roof, interiors, mechanical systems, and health and safety concerns. Anything you want to add specific to Span?
No, but maybe if you go to the following slide.
Okay.
If I get it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So even within that executive summary where we have ranked each individual ones, if you can see the little bubbles, you notice here at Span, those bubbles are a little redder than they were maybe at Somerville Elementary School. So what that does is it makes our list a lot broader in those targeted items that we're looking at. So when we looked at Span, specifically, we came up with a separate list of items to consider there overall. So that list resulted in not the same number applied to the school. It resulted in an actual number applied, rolled up to a $12,400,000 number overall. Still the same setup, still the same, breaking down of data in that same way. Again, we'll look at how we prioritize that with facilities and maintenance, but we wanted to give you a clear picture of everything that could happen at that individual campus. One thing that I wanted to share with you too is that we do have, because Span and Somerville Elementary and the stadium and in fact the new district office all share that same piece of property. This one would be one in which you would want to do some exploration on as far as master planning, because there are certainly some things that you can look at this campus overall for those 4 facilities that you might not look at in the same way more broadly. So certainly want to talk about master planning at this campus overall, and we'll get into that as we go through goals too. So that's the only thing that different I would mention for those two campuses overall. Michelle, you want to go through and talk about Reeves?
Sure. So, you know, when we are getting into now the actual hard numbers, Ben brings up a great point in terms of looking at, you know, many of your facilities that are shared campuses, you know, so there is cost that can be shared or, you know, shared by more than one facility. So that's a great example here for Reeves and DuBose as well. And so, you know, now that we have an assigned number, and it's just a number for a budget, you know, we can pool those numbers together and understand how best to utilize those for the advantage of the campus as a whole, and then individually for each school, if that makes sense. So again, Reeves and DuBose is another campus that we looked at. You know, Reeves, I think the overall score for this particular facility was a 4. It is in fairly reasonable shape. But I believe, you know, it was some site drainage, some other portable conditions that lend itself to, you know, wanting to understand how to improve that facility specifically. And DuBose, I know we've talked about in the past, you know, alleviating some of the overcrowding issues, which you have when you, you know, redrew the attendance zones there. But if, you know, to handle any additional capacity, you would want to think about, you know, adding a wing, you know, a classroom wing that might be able to serve both schools, you know, and how that capacity might change over the next 10 years, or, you know, or renovate in place portions of the school that really need it. So we've made an attempt to, you know, you can see the overall number here is relatively much less than the numbers you previously saw for Somerville and Span. It's a newer school, you know, the list was more yellow and less and shorter, you know. So we can probably go to DuBose next too. In DuBose, I know that we've touched on some of the issues there. There were some site issues here in terms of fencing, but also, you know, ball fields and play fields that could be improved to the benefit of both schools, really.
So DuBose, as you're looking at this joint campus, DuBose is obviously different than Reeves. Reeves is built in a different era. It's newer. It has a lot of the features that you look for in an elementary school now, as far as the quality goes. So there's not a lot of deficiencies there. And DuBose is a different story. It's a larger school, A, and then B, it's an older school, so its deficiencies are more broad. So you'll see that list has a lot of reds and some oranges, and that translates into a much larger budget for this school. So you get maybe a little over $3 million on maintenance items at Reeves, whereas on DuBose, it'd be more closer to a $9 million if you rolled up everything that was kind of included in those options for you more broadly and overall. Austin Middle School is, and we picked these so that we could describe kind of the components, the different things that you can do. It's not like you're going to go and just renovate everything at once. You want to make very good decisions as far as not only what's the short-term solution, but the long-term solution. And it might be renovation and some additions at DuBose at the end of the day, but at Austin Middle it might be something different because its age and its structure and its setup is different as well. At Austin Middle, you did do an addition there. So half that campus is brand new. Half that campus doesn't need to be even looked at from a renovation standpoint, doesn't need to be replaced. However, probably those older buildings, that might be an option that we consider down the road. And this tool helps us helps you actually make those decisions moving forward. So we looked specifically at Austin Middle School when we looked at those ratings a little bit higher overall because that new addition does bring the whole school up, but really focused in on where the problems were at Austin. And you can see there it's at that existing 1964 remaining structure on there. If you take all of those conditions and roll them up, then it gets to be, a lot of, a good deal of money. Around $15 million for if you were taking that building and really doing a tremendous renovation to its existing footprint. Now, I don't want to forecast what decisions might be made, but this is one of those in which you might say, is it going to cost me less to add back what I need there rather than renovate that 1964 building? So those are the kind of options that you get into when you start to look at what it was going to cost, what it does cost to take care of roofs, to take care of mechanical systems overall. Finally, Fort Dorchester.
We did want to just complete our examples tonight with, an example from every grade level. So we looked at Fort Dorchester High School, and I know that we had brought this to you previously. Again, we applied the same evaluation and cost principles to Fort Dorchester High School. I believe that, the demographic data is telling us that enrollment may increase, through the next 10 years. So, again, just reminding you all, we have the demographic backup to support us at every school, whether it really warrants an addition, or whether it really is okay to have a renovation. I mean, so the demographic data is also, again, another tool in our toolbox that will help us make these decisions and prioritize. So, again, you can see, with the deficiencies for this particular school, I know that there were some roofing issues and some MEP issues that really drive the cost here, which are reflected in the scoring category with the yellows and the reds. There's also, some site drainage issues, storm drainage issues that, when they linger over time, they just get worse. And so it's just, again, a matter of understanding how best to solve the issues at each school, and determining how much longer they can last before they really have to be addressed. So again, this is the number here. Has significant, building envelope MEP systems. And I think that, we'll probably see this later. We have categorized or broken down the overall cost into these 5 components. So you can see how the breakdown becomes. But MEP systems, building envelope systems, these are the systems that provide a healthy interior environment, for the students and the teachers. These are the systems that keep rain out of the buildings. And those are, we're just architects at the end of the day, but these are the most important building components that ensure, the livelihood and the health and safety of the building inhabitants. So
$33 million, right, is a lot of money. So don't take that as this is what you need to spend at that school. Those are all the options available to you rolled up. So it's really important that you know that if you want to replace the roof, it's going to cost this much. If the condition is such that you don't have to replace it in the near future, but you do have to look at it in 10 or 15 years, we need to make sure that you know what you're getting out of your scope. And that's the whole reason we're doing this exercise like that. It's not to make your jaw drop. It really is not. It's meant to inform and make good decisions. That's all it's meant to do. I'm not saying that you're spending $33 million at the school because you don't need to spend $33 million. It's prioritizing what the actual categories are and what the actual things are that are necessary. That dollar amount represents a complete and total upgrade to that facility to bring it up to code. And that means replacement of specifically mechanical systems, which is a huge number. And like Michelle mentioned, roofing is a huge number. When you try to wholesale replace any roof on any building that's big, especially at your high school level, where the footprint is much larger. So we'll get into the weeds on that one. I didn't want to scare you with those numbers, but I want to give you all the numbers available to you to make those decisions as we look overall. Pause there for just a second. Is any, certainly questions, or if you want to look at other facilities, I'm happy to do that too.
I feel like that we just need time to kind of absorb this, you know.
Right.
And kind of just let it sink in and let us look at it, because Tony, of course, will, you know, be our guide to us, but most of us have served on the facility committee, I think, and so we know what kind of things you're talking about, because we've seen them and pointed them out as well. So my opinion is that we just need time to absorb it and then have questions.
Anybody else? I hope our PTAs are listening with their fundraising. But we get what you're saying, and Ms. Crosby's right. We're going to have to look at it real carefully.
Yeah, and happy to give that to you, because at the end of the day, it's just a lot of it is a lot of information in there, and it is a lot to digest. And certainly what we're here today to do is it's almost like we're in progress always with these reports. That's why they're draft versions until we finally get to whatever that right answer is for Dorchester School District 2. So we'll get you all of that information and certainly digest it even further. Now, those were 6 schools. We did that for 26 facilities overall. So I've got my little booklet, and I'm sure that you're going to have your booklet too, to kind of go through and suss through all that cost data. If you really want to see a big number, however, you would look at it if we took all 26 of those facilities and said, what's it going to take? And it's going to be enormous. And don't be scared of that number. It's just information. It's just meant to help you make decisions. But if you look at that overall, at each of those facilities, that's $261.7 million worth of need. And that's not 2 years, that's 10 years or more. That's that big window, is what do you need? If you stopped everything that you were doing right now, what is your liability at those buildings? In 10 or 15 years, it's $261 million based on today's value. I would never propose that you spend that kind of money on just renovations of buildings. There are smarter ways to break that up so that it is less money. I gave an example of Austin Middle, for instance, where it might be less money to take down and build a new wing as opposed to renovate an existing 1960s wing, for instance. So this is all just information, and we'll get to whatever the right answer is. But if you roll everything up and from a needs standpoint for every single school, it would be very large in size. The thing I would point out here more explicitly, though, is that what this does help us to understand is where the need is. You can see the larger portions are the high school portions, and that's specifically Fort Dorchester and Somerville High School. Both those roofing and mechanical system upgrades, since they are larger, they take up a bigger slice of that pie. And then some of the older elementary schools and middle schools, those tend to make take up a lot of energy as far as that pie goes overall. If you look at it from a percentage standpoint, when we look at what kind of improvements need to be made, where is that focus? More than half of that dollar amount is coming from mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. So if you do mechanical and electrical plumbing upgrades to those facilities, meaning replace those big units that are either getting to the end or have exceeded their life expectancy, that's where all those big dollar amounts are coming. That's followed, of course, by building envelope, which are your roofs. Those aren't glorious tasks to do, but they're necessary tasks to do, and you have to spread those across several years. But those two items make up 72% of the entire facility. The interiors number and the site number and the health and safety and security number, those are much smaller, and there's a reason why those are smaller, and it's because you've done a good job of really addressing those through the years. Even though you've been growing tremendously, you've been doing a good job of addressing and keeping those interiors clean and healthy, safe and functional, and you've been able to do those portions pretty well. But all of that relates to how that all those options available to you as we work through. Any additional questions, follow-up?
I just had one comment. I think that it's important for us to realize as well that a lot of these things, safety committee and our maintenance department have on schedules. So we are doing some of these things already, and we are budgeting for those things. So as long as we understand those are already in our budget, that will come off of that number. So that makes that number look a whole lot better.
That's right.
But anyway, I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we're looking at these things too.
That's right. Absolutely. And so that's a good point, because we might say camera system is needed at this facility, whereas I know that it's in the works already. However, it's a deficiency when we visited, so we have to note it that way. So some of those things start to roll off as you complete what your summer program looks like right now as well. Any other comments or questions before we move
One
forward?
thing I guess it pertains, but does a school really have a lifetime expectancy, like with this Knightsville and Somerville Elementary? I mean, they're getting up in age. I mean, do we really have a lifetime expectancy? I mean, do they have one on schools?
There's not a
OSF?
specific year, but if there's, at some point, it becomes more cost beneficial to scrape and build new as opposed to renovate. Even when it's 75% of a new construction cost, and you're spending 75% to renovate a 1960s or 70s building that is not going to ever be up to the space standards of your current need, you really would start to look at it then and weigh that decision. Does it have, everything has a life expectancy. Mechanical systems and roofs are a big one, but they're just parts of the components of a building. So it does. And typically, schools last anywhere from 30 to 60 years. I mean, that's just kind of what you do, or what I've seen overall in South Carolina through the years. Any other questions? All right, so just briefly, we talked a little bit about goal setting. So that's kind of the next step. We've taken that. We've taken those maintenance costs, we've taken all of those items and classified them. We've created a catalog that we're now going to use with the administration and with the facilities department to really iron out a 1 to 3 year maintenance plan and use the rest of that information to inform us as far as what your options are available to you from an overall long-term and range standpoint. We talked a lot about we talked a little bit about this last time as far as 8 goals that we want to look at from a long-term standpoint, and we went through those individually. Last time I wanted to give you just a little bit more definition there. If I could do that, that would be helpful. So that first goal was to continue maintenance of all existing facilities. And that's what I was just mentioning, taking that 1 to 3 year approach and saying what are the necessity things that the district needs to really do, and now how much is that going to cost, and when is that scheduled? So that's part of this initiative, and certainly one of your goals as you look at capital improvements plans kind of overall. What we will be doing is taking that and coordinating it with any long-term plans. That's an important point because we don't want you to spend money now that you then have to spend money on top of later on. So we will be balancing that as we go along, or pointing the district in the right direction there as far as looking over. Jenny mentioned this. Part of maintenance and part of capital improvements plans are based on schedule, what that perceived schedule might be. If it needs to be happening right now, obviously the costs that we know are fairly valid, but they do need to be escalated up if we don't need to do those in the next couple of years. The second goal that we talked about last time was a desire or an option to remove all temporary portable classrooms from the district by way of making those either permanent, meaning additions to school, or just eliminating them where they're not necessary anymore, meaning demolish them and dispose of them in some form or fashion. We did want to say there, though, I know that not all portables are classrooms either. Some of them do serve different functions, whether they be special functions, administrative functions, or storage. So we can talk about those individually. There's actually not a lot of those instances around the school district, so we will be talking and making sure that we've got the right ones identified inside that overall plan for removal or disposal overall. So we don't necessarily need to remove all of them. Just keeping kids out of portables seems to be a preference and a goal. Thirdly, renovate and replace facilities where needed by age or functional obsolescence. That's what we're really talking about when we look at those options for different schools that are older and that might have a significant amount of need versus some that are maybe 80s and 90s and early 2000s that don't have that have need but not significant need, where replacement costs might be less than the actual renovation costs. So as one of the goals, fully renovate and replace portions of elementary school campuses, middle school campuses, and high school campuses. We do want, inside this goal, though, to really know that we're converting space inside of some of these facilities too. Even with some of the schools that have been around for several decades, you might have the need now to convert 2 classrooms into a STEM lab, or you might have the need to take a science classroom and expand that to make it a laboratory space as well. We're asking those questions. We're making sure that we capture that inside of this goal so that that's captured inside of the long-term plan as well. Fourth, construct new additions or new schools to alleviate growth in some of the areas of the school district. As we saw in the demographic study, there's definitely growth in the middle school area and in the high school area. So those are 2 areas that we focus on at least initially. For the middle school zone, and I believe you're taking action with this right now, the Gregg Middle School zone seems to be the one that's growing the most. So really looking at a new middle school in that zone to alleviate crowding by redrawing some of those, fine-tuning, not redrawing completely, but fine-tuning some of those lines. You can actually make a big difference and keep middle school enrollment equal or equitable across the school district in that way if you go the new middle school route. For the high school and this goal, there's going to be a couple options available to you at the end of the day. Since you are showing high school growth, that growth is not as big as a new high school. So there's no need necessarily to think about a brand new high school that has its own comprehensive program or its own comprehensive athletics. You can either take one of 2 approaches there. You can take and continue to do additions at your existing high school campuses, perfectly valid way of solving the problem there. You do, if in that scenario, you would look at where the additions need to be in the core areas, meaning do you need more dining room space? Do you need more art rooms? Do you need more science labs in addition to just the general education classrooms? So that's one method to maybe think about high school improvements overall. The other one is some districts throughout the state and even in the region also do magnet schools of some sort, whether that be arts infused, a technical high school, or an early college high school, one in which the students have a home high school that they're attending but go for the major portion of the day at a new campus. That might be one method in which you could alleviate some of the growth at all 3 high schools by having another facility to accommodate there. So those are just 2 ideas from a capital improvements plan that goal might lead you to kind of think about as we kind of move it forward. Fifth goal overall, as Ms. Hughes mentioned, really safety and security and things that are ongoing right now to continue that level of safety and security that you're already doing, continue those improvements, but make sure that that's top priority in your capital improvements plan overall. And the district's done a really good job there. Like I said, it's only 1% of that big rolled up number, which just speaks to how much you have been doing over the years to get there. So number 6 was improve and enhance campuses for outdoor learning, recreation, and traffic patterns. I would put an underline under traffic patterns there to make sure that we get students and parents off of roads as much as we can for every facility, so that major roads throughout the areas of schools remain safe, and traffic doesn't build up on roads and highways throughout the school district and throughout the county. Playground equipment where needed, meaning there are playground equipment that needs to be replaced. So those are just part of those overall enhancements that each campus would be looking at overall. Parking is another one that goes hand in hand with making sure you've got cars off the road, making sure you have the right amount of parking available for not only your main stay with your teachers, but also parents and large events that happen at each of these campuses as well. Almost there. Next to the last one is number 7 is upgrade student learning environments to bolster program integrity at all facilities. So we really thought hard about that. I think we had a little bit of dialogue last time we met about what that actually means, and it is thinking about how that environment can be more useful for students. One of those things might be as simple as furniture replacement in a lot of these schools, where it is mobile furniture. You can move it around. You can use it for a lot of different types of learning. There's a lot of options available from a furniture standpoint in there. It also, like I said, might be converting some of those spaces that are underutilized or utilized in a certain way to be utilized for STEM or STEAM or Project Lead the Way or any other educational programs that you're now offering that you didn't previously offer when the schools were constructed. One thing that we can do there is complete a teacher survey. We're glad to do focus groups as we kind of get more into the weeds on that detail. I'm doing that right now with 2 school districts to really understand broad base what teachers think about their space and about their classroom. This upgrading that student learning environment is all about making sure that the standards exist throughout the school district in all zones. So whether you're in the northern part of Dorchester School District 2 or the southern part of Dorchester School District 2, the same quality of the space is in the classroom in the northern versus the southern or the eastern or the western. So making sure that those district standards are captured, documented, and form the basis of making improvements moving forward. We also do educational specifications in the same way as looking at your systems, making sure the space is certainly comparable from all different parts of the school district. And finally, this is more of a continue to utilize industry partners, higher education institutions around the school district and the region, and nonprofit partnerships to expand your program offerings where you can. You guys have done a fantastic job of this in the past, I know. You've got City of North Charleston, you've got YMCA, you're working in any number of different nonprofits and higher ed. Trident Tech is another good example. So continue to really use your partnerships when you're thinking about your programs. They may have space available, and we need to really think about that as we put that master plan, that master capital improvements plan together overall. That way, you're not spending as much money, but you're getting the same results that you're going for overall. So that those were kind of the goals explained. Any discussion? Any thoughts about those goals kind of overall from last time? Mr. Powell, was there anything you wanted to add about goals?
You did a wonderful job. It's been a long time in the making, and we've talked about it for several years. I'm just glad we're finally getting around to it. And of course, we've finished this stage of our building program with the exception of the new middle school that we're working on now. And we will, from there, hopefully, we'll be able to spend our monies and our time really directing it to what you've come up with here. It's quite an order for us, but we need to get at it. start doing it.
Yes, sir. So again, this is step 2 of however many we need to get the plan right. But as our goal is working forward is to really sit with and have a work session with district leadership, facilities, and maintenance. Take all those big items, or all those individual items that roll up to that big number, and make that an actionable plan for you. Not so that you can both be predictable and know what that capital outlay is going to look like over the next 10 years from a maintenance standpoint. That will, again, inform how you look at a broader capital improvements plan. And then finally, how do you pay for it? How do you get there? What does that look like? So all of those are next steps for us. This is going to be a continual dialogue. You'll see me again soon. But if there are any other questions, I'm glad to entertain those. I do have copies of all of the exhibits, and we'll certainly get you a digital copy of the presentation itself.
Any questions? I think you answered everything, but you just gave us a lot more food for thought. So we'll see you next month again, huh? We do appreciate your whole team.
Thank you.
I know that was a lot of work, so thank you.
That's right. It's wonderful, though. I mean, you really get to know every nuts and bolts about every single school, and it really does help you make good decisions with planning for the future. So we're glad to be part of the effort here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, at this time, we will close our workshop, and we will reconvene at 6 o'clock for our board meeting. And I think we have a wonderful lady who has offered to prepare dinner for us. She is a teacher, and she just wanted to do that for the board. So if you are hungry, we'll go into, I think it's room 140 or 141? Okay. And y'all are welcome to stay if you would like. Thank you all. I can smell the